Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the CHP podcast. Yet again, I'm Ariana Scalfo. I am your host, the Director of Coaching here at CHP. And today I have with me two of our new coaches. You may have seen our hiring call go up. I actually hired these guys before I put that up. That's how badly I wanted them to work for me. So meet Mike Thompson and Justin Jones. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
Welcome. I'm excited to have these guys on board and on staff. They're both incredible coaches, fantastic athletes, and their perspective is, at least to me, really important as an addition to the CHP team and the CHP staff. We work with so many men in the military, so many men in police, EMS, firefighters. I think it's really important to have individuals on our staff that have lived that and kind of understand the unique challenges that men in those fields face, and women. But men's mental health is pretty important to us as well here at CHP. Obviously, I mean, we're human beings. But today I wanted to bring these guys on to chat with me just about their experiences with mental health, being in fields like the military, like police, and then just being coaches and coaching other men and the common issues that they see men facing. So yeah, we're going to talk about all of that today. Briefly, I'm going to introduce them both just so I don't talk for that long. Justin, you started training pretty early, right? You were track and field and basketball?
Yep.
Yeah. So he basically track and field, basketball, fitness, and then when you jumped into the military, you started to focus on sort of the selection pipeline and selection process. So military and police and all these other jobs, they really demand strength and endurance. They're kind of the first hybrid, I would say. So you really kind of fell into hybrid athletics that way in training for selection. And then you had such a good time kind of doing that and training that way that you kept doing it. Now you've done triathlons, powerlifting meets, ultra marathons, and then obviously you're coaching and you're the father to a toddler, a new son. So congratulations again on that.
Thank you.
So yeah, Justin, and then Mike. Mike, you were a police officer and you've been coaching for 14, 15 years?
14-ish. Yeah, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you personally, obviously, in being a police officer, you've done similar trainings, that you started out in sort of the heavy strength side, powerlifting, strongman, and then you've done ultra marathons. I know you just recently signed up for one.
Mm-hmm. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I am too. So basically your background is, I don't want to say similar to Justin's. It's almost like Justin came at it from the endurance side and then you came at it from the extreme strength side. But you've both arrived at hybrid fitness, A, because you enjoy it, but also because it seems like both of you see a lot of utility in it, and the sort of health and fitness side of it. So welcome to you both. Hi, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
So since I've just blabbed a lot, I'm going to just flip it over to you because it's just a lot of me talking. Mike, we're going to start with you. When I asked you to do this podcast with me about men's mental health and how things have affected you, and you also are the father of a young girl, she's a toddler technically as well. So both of you guys are toddler dads. Where did your brain go? Like kind of immediately, like what really interested you the most in this discussion? And it could either be personally or having worked with a lot of clients that are affected by this. Kind of from your perspective, what interests you the most about this discussion?
Sure. I think where my brain first goes in this, sort of mental health discussion, without going down the rabbit hole that we may later of like my own experiences, my diagnoses, things I still deal with, now, and things that, ultimately did kind of was the catalyst for me leaving policing, was mental health issues, anxiety, things like that. But I think from a training perspective, one of the most interesting things that I've noticed over my own training career, and then especially again when I was a police officer and still trying to train, stay in shape, lift heavy, from the strength sort of things. Um, I had never, I mean, it's always been on my radar. It's always been important to me, like talking about guys' mental health, like trying to be there for friends and support each other and things like that, my entire life, even before I had any sort of diagnoses. But I didn't realize the correlation for myself between actual physical symptoms and physical pain and how that can relate back to mental health issues. So my specific example is like the last year I was a police officer, I was going through a lot mentally with the anxiety and, probably some depressive type things at the time, but also experiencing just debilitating hip and back pain, like horrible. Couldn't get in and out of a car, had to call in sick multiple times for work, just couldn't move. Which obviously put a little bit of a damper on lifting.
Yeah.
But I did, sort of, once I kind of came out of that and kind of, was able to rise above that and not just be in the moment, I was able to realize like, yeah, there was some not so great load management from the training perspective going on for what I was dealing with, but also like, I think there was a huge correlation between literal like physical pain symptoms and my mental health status at the time. And I've noticed that at, various times, and I've learned to manage it a lot better now. But I think that's, especially in these sort of tactical sort of professions, there's a lot of emphasis on, okay, we got to prevent lower extremity injuries and back injuries and neck injuries, all these sorts of things. And it's very like this sort of like biomechanical approach to it, which is good. But at the same time, like there's that psychological component. And if you don't address that, in my opinion, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, at least in my experience.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's heavy. It's a lot to deal with. And that was a huge decision, I'm sure, that you made, and you thought a lot about it. So I'm curious to hear more from you about that. Justin, same question to you.
Yeah, again, not going down the rabbit hole, we probably will. I would say the first thing is just talking about it, because I feel like men, especially veterans, men in general, first responders, there's a lot of isolation that goes on internally, which I found out a lot of people deal with the same things and have no idea everybody else is. So that's probably an interesting rabbit hole we'll go down. It was made more complicated in my experience because I had have a clearance, and there's a whole stigma around that as well when it comes to mental health and things like that. And then transitioning to having my son, the tendency for me and for a lot of people is kind of workaholism, just jump right into work to avoid things. And so I think that I'm just really interested to kind of dive down my personal experiences, the experience that I had with athletes, and men's mental health in general.
Perfect. So that leads kind of right into one of the first things that I felt we could talk about, and you guys have already hinted at it, but I've noticed that for a lot of men that I know in my life and a lot of men that I've worked with, um, obviously there's a lot of stigma, right? There's a lot of stigma around men's mental health. I feel like, and again, this is my perspective as a woman, so feel free to correct me. But I feel like, especially with men, there's this very like pull yourself up by your own bootstraps with your mental health, where it's like your mental health sucks and you're depressed or you're feeling anxious, so you should go fix it. Um, and I think that's not particularly helpful. Like, I wouldn't find it helpful. But I find this is something that, we talk a lot about there being a huge need for more support for men and more mental health support for men. But I don't see as many easy to access resources, like resources that are out in front of your face, easy to participate in. And I've noticed that for a lot of men in my life, they may have been dealing with low-grade anxiety or low-grade depression, but then a major life change happens, whether it's getting a job, losing a job, having a child. Something shifts enough that and that this happens, to men and women, but whatever coping mechanisms that they had for dealing with that suddenly no longer work, or suddenly they're just no longer sufficient to cope with all of the new stress or the new schedule, lack of sleep, whatever it is. And I've seen that be a major catalyst for men experiencing the biggest downtrend in their symptoms. So not saying that they had 0 before and now they have 100%. Maybe they were always kind of controlling what they were experiencing before, and then this major life change happens, and suddenly everything just feels so much worse. And I feel like when they get to that place, there's also this sense that somehow it's their fault that you, like, quote unquote couldn't handle it, or I'm not sure if you guys experienced this or that you've seen this, but I think there's, at least in, I want to say, common sort of society cultural messaging, there's a lot of talk about how if a woman is suffering or a woman is having depression or anxiety, it's society, or it's a problems outside of herself that are causing it, and she can go seek help in order to deal with these problems, but it's not her fault. But I feel like with men, there's this messaging that it's either toxic masculinity, whatever you want to define that as, or it's just them not being prepared to handle a life change. It just feels much more like it's made out to be men's fault. So I feel like that a lot of men I've spoken to seem to have a lot of, like you said, Justin, internalized shame about these very real, very common issues. So, from your perspectives, and you guys can choose which one of you wants to go first, or I can ask if it makes it awkward. But what major life changes, even if you just want to touch on them briefly, either for yourself or for your clients, do you feel really were the catalyst for you realizing that you needed more help, or your clients needed something else, or whatever it may be? Did you experience, major life changes that really just changed everything for you?
Do you want me to go first again? I can go first again. So kind of immediately what comes to mind is I talked a little bit about, physical symptoms that I've had, and I've had various physical symptoms over the years. And those have always been historically where I'm like, yo, something's up, like pay attention when I start having physical symptoms. I like to think over the years I've kind of maybe gotten a little bit better at recognizing things before it gets to that point. But like the example of, you were saying, like societal expectations, and it's like, yeah, men need help. I feel like from my perspective as a man, it is, in the communities that I'm in, it's very much, it's more okay to talk about this, like men's mental health being a thing. The police department I was a part of was very, for their part, pretty forward thinking with that kind of stuff. Like you could access confidential counseling anytime. You don't have to tell your supervisor what you're doing. You go during work hours. There was a peer support group where if you didn't want to go to formal counseling, you could just meet up and have a beer or two with someone. But these people were like trained facilitators that had a little badge that they wore on their uniform, so you knew that they had that training. So it was good. So it's like the conversation is there, but it's still very much, I like that, like internalized shame, right? Like it's maybe it's not your fault entirely, but it's still like 100% your responsibility to fix yourself. And I would agree that it's your responsibility to take action about it. But in my experience, like fixing yourself as the goal is not it's not that simple, I guess. So like going back to the physical symptoms and stuff, like I really first started noticing myself having a problem when I had a shift change at work, precinct change, hours got stupid, like less sleep, all those sorts of things. And I didn't even have a kid at the time. But like with the back and hip pain, like my mindset was like, yo, dude, like fix yourself. Like you're not living up to what you need to be, what's expected of you by your peers, by your wife, by, the standards that you have for yourself. I still remember, like, I would have, squat workouts, like here, I was training at home at the time. I'd do a set, and literally one day, like I had a panic attack, like between sets, like the physical stress of that just put me over the edge. And like these panic attacks I used to have were like seizures. Like I was on the floor for 15 minutes, hyperventilating, shaking, like limbs, like getting super hot, tingly, like all those kind of things. I literally would I had a panic attack and it was like, all right, and I got up and just continued the workout like nothing happened because it was very much this pull yourself together. You've got this, like this very just kind of hard charging no matter what kind of mindset, which you're in a life or death situation. Okay. Do you deal with it later? You're doing a workout. Like what doesn't make like now talking about it's like, what an idiot, you know, but that was, 7 years ago. That's kind of where I was at. And yeah, so the stressors that you mentioned that have been big for me was definitely the lack of sleep. Having a kid, lack of sleep goes along with that. Completely dynamic, change in dynamics there. Job transitions for me, I haven't. It's been there, but that's not one of the big ones. I think for me, I think it's always more related to a physical stressor first that really kind of sets things off. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It
Yeah.
definitely does.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, trying to think back to the original question here and the original topics, I should have taken a note of what I wanted to go through. But for me, I think where I was at in the military was very open about mental health politically, I guess. It was open and out there, but actual culture wise was not so much. So for me, it was very, I mean, maybe this is kind of vulgar in a sense, but I was at a wedding last year with a lot of guys that I used to work with, and one of them, that we all went shooting and had a good time shooting, but one of them pulled his gun out and was showing us his gun, and he was like, "Yeah, can you hold it?" And just without thinking, my joke was, "Can I put it in my mouth?" Like just as a joke, right? It was he laughed, right? And then he just said, "Oh yeah, like if I didn't know you were in the Navy, I would now," right? And so the culture is it's not a great culture to be in, like as far as that being a way of kind of going about things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't really have we had the support there if we needed it, but nobody really used it. It was very stigmatized, clearance stuff on top of that, and very much looked down on as kind of like weak, from a alpha male perspective, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until honestly like a year ago when I was like, oh, everybody I worked with probably dealt with the same things I have been, kind of thing, because it felt very isolated. As far as life changes go, I had a big life change. I got a concussion in a selection course and then had to change jobs, and that was a big identity shift. And for me, there was also a big loss of the thing that I used to cope, exercise, because I was recovering from I had some balance issues and things like that, and migraines that would happen, and so I couldn't really exercise as much. So that was a big kind of hit to what I used to cope, but that did come back. I was able to exercise clearly. But then, yeah, we had a kid, and any sense of control and ability to kind of cope with things became now at the whims of a baby and a toddler, which is awesome.
Tiny
But
dictator.
yeah, awesome, but also overwhelming, right? So that was another shift of exercise is a great tool, but if it's the only tool you have, it's kind of a crutch. And so then that started this whole journey of, okay, I have to put in some better tools in place, and also trying to create more community, because a lot of my friends now are veterans. They're out too, and so I try to meet up with them regularly and talk about things. There are some, I look at some of them now where we're all going through the VA disability process, and they're getting high disability ratings for mental health, and I'm like, oh, it wasn't just me anymore. And so now there's like more open conversation about it, and also realizing that the clearance process now, like as long as you take care of things beforehand. I've only known one person that lost their clearance because of this, and it was because they uh, did not self-report. They were basically involuntarily brought to the hospital, kind of thing, like very serious situation. Um, so I think that that's gotten better as well, just as the military has gotten a little better about dealing with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the biggest light bulb for me was the fact that actually I was talking to a therapist and kind of opened up about something, and she gave me this knowing smile and she just said, you all come in here and think you're the only person that deals with these things. Every vet I talk to comes in here with the same things, opens up about it, thinks they're the only person in the world, and you all are just suffering in silence right next to each other and have no idea. And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me of like, oh, interesting. So I think that's another reason I'm just really interested in this topic and talking about it, just because I don't think, even though I'd worked through a lot by that point, I didn't even know that that was the case, really.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, like a lot.
Mhm.
And to your point about, knowing that someone was in the Navy, I had a lot of friends growing up that went into the Marines, and all of their personalities and their humor all shifted the same direction to dark.
Mhm.
Like it was like someone flipped a switch on all my friends. So yeah, definitely felt that. So knowing that you guys have also both, obviously you have male friends, you're both coaches, you've worked with a lot of men. Um, what are, if you've noticed a trend when men sign up to work with you, and your clients sign up to work with you, and again, we're focusing on men in this conversation, but I would assume that there's at least some similarities. But what are the most common, and not even the shift itself, but triggers? Like, what are men experiencing that drives them to want to make a change? Either yourself or your clients. Kind of what was the big? You guys have both mentioned those aha moments, obviously, but really, what's the tipping point for a lot of these guys? And do you feel like they're, I don't want to say waiting until it's quote unquote too late, but do you think that they would seek help or change earlier if they recognize that it wasn't their fault, quote unquote?
Potentially, yeah. That's almost, I don't want to say universally, but more often than not, I'd say like 75% of the time, um, when someone wants to start coaching and like get real serious, usually there's either a big, event they're trying to do, or they're trying to lose a bunch of weight. It's like one of the
Mhm.
two. Um, there's almost always a move, a breakup. Um, what are some other big ones? A career change, somewhat. I don't get that one as much, or like a career opportunity that's coming up, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, that they're like, oh wow, like I need to. I've even had, going outside like this sort of tactical thing. Like I've had people sign up because they're like, hey, I got this promotion at work. I've got this huge team. I've never run a team like this before, and I got to build some confidence in myself to be able to do it. And they've chosen fitness as a way to do it, right?
Mhm.
Because like something that's just them, they can control it, which I think is awesome. Like I think that's really really cool.
Yeah.
Um, so things like that. I think kids also, like, I'm working with a lot of mostly married guys and a lot of dads, and um, when they've got like a new kid coming, I'll get huge influx of people who are like, hey, I'm having a baby in 6 months. I'm kind of wrapping my head around the physical demands of this, and I'm not quite being, in their words, like not quite being the man they want to be for their kid. Which again, we could talk about that phrasing, but
Yeah.
like that's sort of an impetus for them to be like, oh wow, I've got this. I kind of gotta, in their mind, they've got to like start to level up, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, those are the most common ones that I see.
Yeah, I've had a lot of career related things. So either a career change or academic change or a life change, like having a kid, where people all of a sudden they were serious athletes before, but now they don't know how to handle the schedule really. I've got people, obviously, tactical world, preparing for certain academy selections, fitness tests, things like that. I would say those are the largest two things as far as people coming to me. I think something that I haven't dealt with as much personally, but something that I do feel like I have to do a lot of quality control, or not quality control, but like damage control on, is body image things with the state of social media nowadays, and YouTube and some of the big hybrid influencers that may or may not take steroids. You know, the super ripped, fit, fast, athletic people feeling like they don't look good at all because all they do is they get online and they see people that are more jacked, and it's this echo chamber of horrible things for your body image. Um, so I don't, I hesitate to say body dysmorphia because that's actually a diagnosis, and I don't want to say that's actually something that a professional would have to say. But there's definitely at least some aspect of managing how they see themselves and their goals, because they'll be like, oh yeah, I want to run an ultra marathon or do the selection course, and I want to be like, I want to look like X person online. Won't name any names, but there are some common ones that come up all the time. And it's like, that's not probably not a feasible goal in your time frame with your where you're at now, and it's honestly probably not even going to add anything to your life or your enjoyment. You already are pretty lean, pretty fit. You can do some awesome things. Um, so again, that's not something I've dealt with personally a lot, because I've always kind of veered toward performance myself, and kind of been able to manage that. But it's something I see a lot in men specifically. Um, Even like, I've had some guys come to me that are fairly overweight and want to lose weight, and the thought of they'd see somebody online, and that's so overwhelming to them, they wouldn't even be able to get started, which was interesting to me when I started to see that. Um, but yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thread that I see, even in people that don't deal with it as much. They definitely still bring it up. Um, so yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
I feel like body dysmorphia, whether you want to consider it like how you say there's disordered eating and then an eating disorder, right? Like there's different levels of the same disordered thinking pattern. One is an actual disorder, and the other one's just kind of like the La Croix version of it, where it's like a little bit of a bubble. But I see so many men dealing with body dysmorphia or strength dysmorphia. And I think it's kind of disguised. I mean, in all people and in all eating disorder world, I mean, it's actually fascinating. There's a huge majority of people who have diagnosed eating disorders are not actually thin. And I think the same thing happens in men, where a lot of men who are suffering from eating disorders or orthorexia or disordered eating patterns and sort of the body dysmorphia, um, they're sort of suffering from like that bigorexia, where they want to get bigger, they want to get leaner. I see a lot of, and this is mostly in the bodybuilding community, but I've seen it kind of leach into the hybrid space, obviously, because everyone wants to be jacked and fast. A lot of substance abuse, steroid abuse, especially bodybuilding community. There's been a bunch of deaths relatively recently because of it, but it's always been a problem. And then on the endurance side, there's an obsession with being lean and being thin. So it does mimic probably traditional ideas of body dysmorphia a bit more maybe, but I think for men it's like, I don't know, I feel like there's just less compassion for it.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I'm
It's kind of a joke. It's like,
yeah.
it's like you joke some of the things that guys joke about as far in that sort of bigorexia or that kind of thing. Like if like female, I'm generalizing, right? But generally speaking, like you hear that kind of talk between females, it's like, oh no, like you can't talk like that, like that's horrible, blah blah blah. Whereas with men, it's like, oh haha, whatever, which is fine. Like again, dark sense of humor. Like my sense of humor is pretty dark too, but I also try to recognize when that's happening and just be like, yo, is this like, are we just joking or is there a little bit of truth behind this? And there's
Mhm.
usually some kind of like, well, yeah, hot, like 90% joking, but also, and it's like, tell me more about that. And then you
Yeah.
kind of get sucked into the rabbit hole. You're like, okay, so yeah, this is actually potentially something we should talk about more.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point, Justin, yeah, I definitely see that quite a bit. I mean, I've worked with a lot of men. I've worked with a lot of men in the performance space, in the nutrition space, and in the training space, um, and all different sports, all over the planet. And a lot of their concerns are the same. like, like you said, all of you are suffering silently next to one another. But the other thing I think I see a lot of is men in the sort of quote unquote preparation for fatherhood. Does it feel like a proving ground? Because I feel like you have to, for men it feels like you have to do more and be more. Um, and I feel like as a woman who just had a baby, if I could like grab these guys and shake them and just be like, actually do less,
Mhm.
like do less, be a little bit more present. like worry less about how you look, things like that. Like if I could express that, I would. But from a man's perspective, kind of what do you feel that the pressures that men are put under when they have children, or when there's a new baby? Um, what do you think that, or what do you know that they're thinking?
I think that for me specifically, I can speak from my personal experience, obviously, is this kind of pressure to provide.
Mhm.
Obviously, I think that's a pretty common thing. A funny way I saw that actually play out in my life is my wife. She would see a big house and say, "Hey, like that's cool. We should buy that house." And I would laugh with her and everything. Right? That's so funny. But then she did it one time after our son was born, and I felt, rather than thinking it was funny, I felt instant pressure to be like, "Oh, I have to like make a lot of money. She wants that house," which is clearly she was joking. It was a joke. Um, and that was just a very, in the moment I literally felt that and was like, oh, that's a little off, like that's not normal.
Mhm.
There's the pressure to provide, the pressure to be present all the time, um, which are two opposing
Yeah, they're
things.
antithetical.
Mhm.
Yep, yep. There's a movie, I can't remember what movie it is, but there was a lot of memes on Instagram I saw when my son was just born, that were like me enjoying my life and then remembering my wife is pregnant and I need to lock in. Very very common
Mhm.
thing, right? And I think it's compounded by the general male desire to not be a burden and not burden people with your problems, and figure things out for yourself and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and deal with it yourself. So you never talk about it, even with other dads or other men in general, or even to your spouse who just had a baby. So why would you burden her, right? She's got enough going on. Her hormones are crazy, all this stuff. So I think it all kind of just compounds into this isolated environment if you're not careful about it,
Mhm.
and then it can be easy to dive into more work than you need to, workaholic tendencies to feel better and also alleviate some of that pressure to provide. But obviously that creates a negative spiral of, you spend less time with the family, you feel less fulfilled, you quality of work is lower, so you work more, and then it just
Yeah.
spirals into this dark place.
Yeah. That's exactly pretty much my personal experience is just like feeling those contradicting pressures. And it's like, if I feel like I'm doing okay in one area, the other area I don't feel like I'm doing okay because of reasons. Like there's always a list of reasons, like, oh, I could do more of this or do more of that, or those sorts of things are just huge. And then that's not even talking about like actually taking care of your health too. Right.
Yeah.
It's just like, there is, I'm very blessed, like there has never been any pressure, like actual stated pressure from anyone to do any of that. For me, it's all been this sort of societal, or whatever you want to, like the nebulous sort of vague,
Mhm.
just how things kind of have been in my life, and kind of the unspoken, most of the time, sorts of expectations that sort of weigh. And then, like you said, when there's a kid involved, then all of a sudden everything just goes up another level. And I think too, it's been particularly difficult for me at various times because there's not a whole lot of just resources for dads, right? Like there are, but again, they're not, and it's not to the level that women have. Um, because like, when my daughter was born, it was like Leslie had this huge, it's massive physical trauma. It's hormonally, everything's going nuts. And it's like, there's a huge amount of empathy for that. It's like, wow, we got to take care of her, and all of her friends like or take care of her. And there's all these resources for women postpartum, because that time sucks. Like I can't even imagine. Like it's tough for guys, but good lord, like whoa, I can't imagine. Um, and so there's also, but at the same time, there is like kind of postpartum things that dads go through. There's
Mhm.
no resources. There's no nothing. It's, from my perspective, it was always like, hey, help her, help her, help her, help her, which I'm trying to do as much as I can, but I'm human,
Mhm.
and it's again that I think there is so much focus on the female side through pregnancy, postpartum, those first couple years, and rightly so. I think we just need to bring the support for men up a level to maybe not meet that, because we don't have all the physical trauma and all the things, but at least get closer to meeting that, because right now I feel like, from my experience, there was a lot more mental health support in the like tactical sort of like policing side than there was for like being a new dad. Being a
Mhm.
new dad for me was way more isolating than I ever have felt from any of the sorts of work experiences I've had.
Yeah, I've
Yeah, I
definitely
would.
I've seen that. Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Justin.
I was just gonna say, my wife has put no pressure on me, and when I started opening up to her about some of this stuff, she was surprised about it.
Mhm.
You know, again, I've had no pressure put on me from anyone except for society and myself, and so I actually have a kind of renowned, I feel like, a responsibility at this point to help my wife understand some of the stuff that men go through since we have a son. She's a teacher. She's great with early childhood development, but she hasn't experienced some of the male things that in some way can be ingrained at a really young age. And so I've been kind of working through just for my own health, but also just in general for the future of my son. Not that he would turn out bad. She's an amazing mother and like we're good parents, but um, just trying to educate her on some of the pressures that she might not have learned about in school or people might not talk about since we do have a son. And obviously she hasn't experienced that as a woman.
Yeah, I've from obviously my side, there's when you have a sick child or a sick partner or a sick parent, there's a lot of empathy towards the caretaker, right? And there's a lot of resources for the caretaker. Um, but I think somehow and I mean, yeah, I'm sure historically we could say that there's been a lack of support for women in a lot of relationships, but not as a rule. And it's sort of strange that now, men are doing more than ever, but there's still this idea that you guys aren't.
Mhm.
And you're essentially put in the position of being a caretaker for not just your wife or your partner, but now also a newborn. So now you're a caretaker for two people in a culture and a society that doesn't really award parental leave or paternal leave,
Mhm.
not usually. Maternal leave usually isn't that long and or not compensated very well. So there's a ton of financial pressure because there's just time taken off of work.
Mhm.
And I feel like that stress has to be immense because not only are you put into this brand new role, caretaker, with a wife that you love or a partner that you love tremendously, who's gone through massive physical trauma, a bunch of changes, and that's if you have had a healthy childbirth. That's not if you had a traumatic or traumatic birth, or your child isn't quite healthy and you have to deal with NICU and things like that. It's even more stressful. And you're just kind of, you feel like if society catches you slacking, you're a bad dad.
Mhm.
And I feel like there's not a lot of compassion there, but I feel like it sucks. Like it feels like it's a societal issue or a cultural issue more than it is an issue with what men want to be doing. I feel like most men that I speak to would love to be doing a perfect job, um, but maybe they don't have financial resources or they don't have. I mean, really, who actually, except for the very very wealthy among us, have enough money set aside to take off a month from work and not have their career affected?
Mhm.
Like who? So I feel like it's like, at least from my perspective, it just felt like, obviously as a woman who just had a child, I changed. I was exhausted and I couldn't support my male partner. So all the pressure was on him to support me. And I feel like I was going through postpartum depression and hormone issues and things like that. But men do too. Men go through a postpartum depression, and it's probably because their entire life changes. Everything gets super super awesome but super super hard at the same time, but it's almost like you can't say how hard it is because there's this thought that if you admit to how hard it is or that you're having a hard time, you're erasing the experience of your partner or the mother of the child. I don't know, it's very complicated and it sort of sucks. But just from my perspective, I totally saw it happening the same way, and there was like no dad groups. There's
Mhm.
nothing like,
Yeah.
and you speak to other dads and they'd be like, oh yeah, that happened, yeah, totally, like having the worst time. um, but unless you reach out and ask, you wouldn't know.
Yeah. And it's hard, like from my experience, you know, I have dad friends and meet for lunch, talk about stuff. It's just logistically impossible
Yeah.
because kid and work and all this stuff. I mean, I'm sure it's the same thing for women too. I think, again, maybe there's just more formalized resources like moms groups through counseling centers and stuff like that. Maybe I'm just not familiar with what's actually available for dads, but it was like, holy crap. Like, well, we can schedule something 8 weeks from now,
Hmm.
or I
Yeah.
can, I can call you tonight for 10 minutes, with
Until you
half
hear
a
the
brain
screaming.
cell. Yeah. With the half a
Yeah.
brain cell that's left over, after the entire day. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, I don't want to do that. So yeah, I mean, it's, it's tough.
Yeah. Now, as you guys, obviously for yourselves, your personal experience, and then in coaching, one of the big things that I've seen with fitness and the pursuit of health is that it develops self-efficacy, which you guys have actually mentioned, and that's super important. It gives you a feeling of control. It gives you a feeling of um, being capable. So, how have you guys seen that play out really positively, right? Because it can play out super positively. And then what are the ways that you've seen it play out negatively that you've had to either for yourself or other people kind of help adjust expectations or be like, hey, if you have 15 minutes to train, here's how to make it effective instead of hating that you can't train for 2 hours. So, maybe pick whichever direction you want to go with that. But um, how have you seen fitness work as a positive, not knowing that we're talking about being a new dad, but maybe just for whatever you've seen it apply to.
I think for being a new dad, the biggest thing for me and for the athletes I have that are new dads or dads to people young kids, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's new or they're just young, has been this thing that you enjoyed for so long now became a to-do list item that's stressful, and rather than being a stress reliever, it's now adding to your plate of already stressful things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the biggest tool I used and have used with people is just paring things down, because you're probably short on time. If you're not short on time, you're short on emotional energy. And if this thing is no longer a stress reliever, it's actually stressful to go in and do it. And so I'll establish very simple wins as far as their training goes. So here's a 45-minute session if you have the time to do it, but we're going to count this done if you get, for example, 15 minutes of it done. And it's structured in a way that the most important things for their goals are first, whether if it's like a lifting workout. And for me, I mean, that's how I set my bench PR last year, and probably had the least consistent year of my life training wise as far as finishing workouts. I think I didn't go up and add everything, but I think I finished less than 30 full upper body workouts for the entire year. I would go in and do the first 1 to 4 exercises and then call it, whether it was a schedule thing or just an emotional energy thing of I have so much else on my mind and so much else to do. And that was a big personal validator that what I was doing was working, because I was still able to hit PRs and everything. Um, but I find it works really well with athletes too. And it's really difficult, I don't think for men specifically, I think difficult for people in America in general,
Mm-hmm.
with that perfectionist mindset of wanting to do things really well and do it all the way, to kind of adopt that. People are hesitant, but it results in more consistency, and it results in better outcomes. So
Yeah.
I think that's like the biggest tool that I like to use.
Yeah. And it's like, it's almost that same mentality of like, I have to be the perfect, business person, provider, whatever you want to say, the perfect present dad, the perfect XYZ, and I have to have the perfect training schedule and be the perfect athlete, right? Like it's all the same. You got to be 100% in every area. At least that's how I feel. A lot of clients feel. So I 100% agree with that. I'll even do like tiered things where it's like, all right, here's the workout. If you can, tier one, if you're 100% today, you do the whole thing. Tier two, here's the most priority, and help people prioritize those things. Cause a lot of times guys they just don't know what to do, or they don't have a system in their mind for prioritizing things other than, well, what's first is most important, which probably is mostly the case. But at the same time, it's like, all right, do we need to be, for my, gen pop guys, it's like, well, you don't need to be only bench pressing every time you train upper body because it's always first, like just helping people prioritize those things is huge. The self efficacy thing is huge. It's it's one thing when everything is out of control that you feel like you can control a little bit, and I see it coming back to a lot of my guys like identity stuff where it's like, hey, I am acting like the person I want to be, even if it's not perfect. Because like we all aspire to be a certain type of person, and I think that's a good thing. It's just when you're having that perfectionist mindset and you're not content with anything less than 110% in every area, I think that's a problem. So when I see guys like, hey, I got 15 minutes done today, I got 15 minutes done today, I'm moving forward with this, I stuck to my diet 75%, did what I needed to do, or 80%, or we changed the goals so they're 90%, then guys start feeling really, really good. And then when they feel really, really good, they're more excited to do the actual thing. And then when they do the actual thing, it works better versus just, oh, I can't do this 2-hour workout, therefore I'm not going to do anything. And now I feel like crap. And so what's the point of even trying?
Yeah. Yeah, there's this on the chronic disease side, which is where I kind of entered into fitness. There's this concept called spoons. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's just some days you have more spoons than others. You only have so many spoons. So like you said, Justin, kind of the emotional energy, and then just literal energy. And I think there's always this idea, especially if you're a person who's always had all the time you needed, or you could make all the time you needed, and then suddenly life changes so that you don't, whether it's your job, whether it's a lifestyle change, whether it's a new child, whether it's an injury or a setback, and suddenly you don't have as many spoons as you used to. There's this feeling that like, well, now you can't do anything at all, or nothing is good enough, when in reality, if you have 3 spoons, then just do a 3-spoon workout.
And I
And
noticed,
it's,
like, Justin,
yeah.
what you said about, having the least inconsistent year and setting PRs, like right now I am lifting less than I have in, I don't even know, years and years, if not decades, and setting PRs, feeling really good, like not a ton of joint pain. It's like I for so long I think I was trying to push the envelope with everything and just really, really hammering every single weak point and trying to be good at every single thing all the time. Whereas a little bit of apathy for me went a long way. Where I was like, we'll just kind of go in and get this thing done and it'll be fun and whatever. And a lot of that was from some physical stuff that I've been through, from a kind of mental health perspective. But it's I'm making progress. Like my conditioning's improving pretty good. My strength is an all time high. Like cool. Like I'm just gonna keep having fun and messing around, and it'll probably still keep happening.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
think that
I
there's,
think.
oh, sorry, Justin, go ahead.
Sorry, second time I did that.
No,
I
go.
was just going to add, as I was thinking about it, another thing that people have a hard time with, and I do as well. You need somebody kind of outside your head to tell you, is appreciating the small wins outside of training as well. You think about the biopsychosocial model, right? Somebody will come to me and be like, "Oh, my X lift was actually down today," but then I ask about the rest of their life, and it was a super stressful day. They got no sleep and all this stuff. And the fact that they even got the session in and were only a certain small margin off from their prescribed lift is actually a huge win.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they don't realize it because they're just thinking about their lift and they wanted it to go well and it didn't go like they thought, so they're frustrated. But taking a step back and looking at the whole picture, you start to build that confidence that, oh, actually I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing good things, I'm handling all this stress and doing it pretty well.
Yeah, I was just actually talking to a client about that last week, um, because he was talking about his strength gains over the last few years, and it was like, yeah, like I go in on a terrible day. He used to let those things affect him, and he hasn't really much in the last couple of years. He's like, yeah, I'll go in on a terrible day, and I feel terrible, I'll start getting down on myself, and I'm like, well, yeah, but the warm up weight that I was able to hit was more than my PR 2 years ago. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you keep showing up. You, like I said, a little bit of apathy toward any day's performance goes a long way, and then you just try not to predict it. Show up, take what you got, and go home and forget about it. And then wait a few years, and all of a sudden, you're like way better than you ever thought you could be, and you didn't even feel like you tried almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you guys have both mentioned this, so I think I feel like if you over identify with performance parameters, it's very easy to feel defeated when in reality you're still within 10% of your all-time best. Is that true?
Yep.
Yeah,
100%.
100%.
Daily
So
performance. Yeah.
what are your alternatives? Like how do you build that self-efficacy and that strong sense of identity um, when you're in that kind of like weird phase? How do you help people, I guess, become more process oriented?
I like to use the stock market as an example. I'll send somebody a screenshot of the 10-year trend of the stock market and the fact that there's huge dips. I was just telling a client today, actually, he had a kind of a hard day, and I was like, I just want to appreciate that your hard day today would have been your best day last year. And and I literally, did in the air the little graph of the stock market, right? That there's big dips, but over time, the consistency of showing up has good results, and that tends to get them starting to think about it. And then we'll start to go into kind of more process oriented goals of, am I doing the things that the person I want to be would do? Some of those identity things that Mike talked about earlier. Um, and, start to kind of just explain that it's kind of a saying now. It was on a podcast a few years ago: consistently good over occasionally great, right? We're just going to show up and consistently do the work, put a vote in for the person that we want to be. Atomic Habits is a highly recommended book that I'll give to clients that are asking for book recommendations. Um, because it's just like, I am who I say I am, and I am who I want to be because I do the things every day, not
Mm-hmm.
because I'm perfect, not because I can do some crazy feat one day out of the year, but because I do the harder thing, which is just show up every day imperfectly. Um, and then over time, your imperfect action is somebody's perfect action.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think imperfect action also doesn't give you the ego boost that perfect action does. So you kind of have to, I don't know, you have to diversify your portfolio and
Mhm.
and
What do
get
you
those
define as a win?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's exact same for me too. Like stock market's a great analogy. I've never used that, but I will now. So thank you. Um, but for me, it's very data driven. But what that requires on the front end is making sure that the client and myself are on the same page as far as what the goal is, how we're measuring it, what the expectations are to get there. Do we pivot the goal based on where
Mm-hmm.
we're at? And I'll do that all the time. Where it's like, hey, you say you want to do this. Here's what it's going to require. Do you still want to do that? And they're like, well, no. So you get really clear on like, what are we actually shooting for here? Is the 20 pounds important, or are you going to be content with 15 pounds and looking the way you want to look? So just clearly defining the goal, clearly defining where we're going, clearly defining the timeframes, clearly defining the actions it's going to take, track the data. And it's like, you're like, hey, yeah, your body weight fluctuates a lot. That's one thing that really gets in guys' heads, is like how much their body weight fluctuates. Um, Especially the bigger you get, it tends to be bigger fluctuations. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you can, when I can show client data and be like, here is what a very successful fat loss plan looks like over 16 weeks or whatever, and they see the data, this is like the first call, and they're like, oh wow, like his body weight jumped around all over the place, but you see the trend. It's like, this is what you should expect this to look like. And so those bad days, and same thing with like the workout consistency, same thing with nutritional consistency, like being able to actually define like, here is what success looks like and here is what you can expect. Then clients are like, oh cool. And it just, to me, it puts them at ease, is what I see. And it gets
Mm-hmm.
like, they'll put on their check-in forms with things like, well, this week was really good, this wasn't so great, but also I know that, you know they're talking themselves out of their slump, when everything is super clearly defined. That's not to say we don't have little crisis moments, but we all have those, so it's fine.
Oh yeah.
I think it's got to be just zooming out, seeing the big picture, constantly reminding people of that, and using bigger time frames of reference, like 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, rather than 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. You said something that I was already kind of thinking about, but that made it even more. You said that when you're a bigger individual, your weight fluctuations are bigger. Yes, I've seen that a bunch. 1% of your body weight is a lot. When you're
Mhm.
200 plus pounds, like
Mhm.
it's a lot more than when you were 160 or whatever, or for someone who weighs a lot less. The other way I see that manifest with my training clients is the heavier they've ever lifted, the more they perceive a drop in weight when they can't hit, 98% or whatever. And, it always makes me laugh because, like, my deadlift is a lot lower than it used to be. And I find some strength numbers obscene. So, like, Mike, your 725 deadlift, like, it just makes me giggle because I'm like, what is that? Like,
I don't know.
insane.
I don't know what it is either.
But 90% of 700 is closer to 600. And so someone sees
weird.
the 600 on the bar and they're like, oh my God, like my max is over 700, but I'm only lifting 600. And it's like, my brother in Christ, that is 90% of your max.
It's 600
like,
pounds. Like,
600 goddamn pounds.
Yeah.
So to me also, like, when I work with athletes that are maybe further along in their strength journey or faster, I see this a lot with athletes that are very fast. The perception of performance decrease is so, I don't know. I feel like sometimes we lose track of like what should be expected from us. You know, like, you shouldn't be consistently lifting 98% plus of your max.
No.
It's just not possible.
No.
If you can, it's not 98% of your max. Same thing with your speed. So I think that for me too is always an important conversation to have with clients. And they're like, well, it was less today. And I'm like, literally 5% less. You just lift a ton. So I think that too, it's like the bigger the numbers, the bigger the performance goal, the bigger the desired outcome, the further away you're going to feel from it, even if it's just 10%, which is super reasonable.
Yeah, and from a strength perspective, since that's kind of more where my brain goes with percentages and stuff. Like, I had a client just do a mock meet at the gym and set some PRs the other day, and just looking at the videos of, like, he pulled 585, which I think was like a 35-pound PR or something in that neighborhood ish.
Nice.
But it's like, when you look at his training weights, I don't think I had him do anything in training above 505 or 515, something around that, which was still, 5% lower than his all-time PR from, 9 months or a year before that. And I find that the stronger people get, the more counterproductive it is to train closer to the threshold of like what they can actually handle. Like, for me, like with that 725, and granted, I didn't peak, it was just kind of in the program. I was like, all right, let's try it. But like, I did 650 for a double 6 weeks ago. I think everything else has been very relatively light, like maybe high fives for sets of 4, like stuff like that. And I respond better to that kind of sub-maximal training anyway. But I think the more advanced people get, the less margin for error you have when you're getting like real heavy. And so I tend to be more like, hey, let's stay like 4 reps in reserve on most of this all the time. And then just maybe every 6 weeks, see where we're at. And from an endurance perspective, like, I can see that also being like, yo, it's like every time you run, you shouldn't be trying to set a PR, right? Like, it's the whole zone 2 thing that's popular right now, right?
Yeah.
Or like with speed work, when someone thinks they have to be almost puking at the end of every rep, which, rather than pulling back a little bit on each rep and being more consistent over the entire workout. That's a super common thing I deal with. People like, oh, I could have pushed it like just a little bit harder. Like, if I had a gun in my head, I could have gone a little faster. And it's like, that's not the goal. You shouldn't have to put a gun to your head to go as fast as you need to go in training. Like, but it's a common thing. People, I think sports too, endurance sports, like, people are pushed really hard, so they just assume that's how you're supposed to do it.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll like put in workout comments where I'm like, note, it says non-accumulating fatigue. Note. 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 Yeah. So we talked about, shifting training and making maybe your session shorter, or changing the lens that we're using to view wins, right? And making the wins more specific so that you can collect the data. But what are some lifestyle changes that you would recommend to someone who's really just dealing with an identity shift, or the necessity of an identity shift, where it's like, okay, you're not just athlete Bob anymore, now you got to be all these other things. What are other lifestyle shifts that you recommend? Do you recommend that they find community, train with a buddy? Do you recommend that they not make their life about training? Like, how do you kind of push them in their lifestyle to take the pressure off of their athleticism to kind of carry them?
I think two things you said. Support is huge, whether it's just a gym buddy or a coach, or some kind of plugging into something, like even just
Mhm.
something like group fitness or something like that. If someone hasn't ever been interested in that, like just try it, like do something together. um, that's massive, not just from like the accountability perspective, but just from a not isolating. We've talked a lot about like how men will isolate, for better or worse. That's one way to kind of pull yourself out of that, and you develop friendships through shared suffering, like military, police academies. Like that's why they do it the way they do it, because it creates really tight bonds. And so if you're not in that environment anymore, maybe go find it and do it with someone, rather than just trying to put yourself through hell, so to speak. So that's absolutely huge. And the diversification, big word, of identity. And frankly, that's something I still struggle with, is, pouring yourself into work. Like, I am defined by how good of a coach I am, or, how much money I make, or whatever. It's not so much about training for me anymore, but it used to be. And now it's just shifted to something else. So that, that
Yeah.
transparently, like, that's one thing that I, recognize is something, a direction that I trend that probably isn't super healthy for myself. But just being like, okay, I had a crap day training, but I had an amazing time at the park with my kid. Or, work's not going great, but I had a great workout. Or, something else is crappy, but I was able to get 6 hours of sleep last night. Like, just
Mhm.
finding lots of different lots of different wins, and not defining yourself solely as dad, or solely as employee, or solely as athlete, but you are a combination of all of those things, and those really can't even still really define who you are. So just, I tell myself, just take it all with a grain of salt. I think that's my my big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I'd also add on that I think a lot of the people I work with, and myself especially, can become so busy that if somebody asks you what you want to do outside of training, outside of work, there's often a blank stare that you get back of, I have no idea. And so I've given people a rest day, and I've just been like, I've talked to them, and we figured out like what is a relaxing thing. Do they live near the beach? Do they live near a park? Whatever. We're not going to have training be on the to-do list today. We're going to get away from the to-do list and just kind of reflect on, what do you value out of life? What's most important to you? Why do you want to do X event or whatever? What is this giving you? And kind of just give them time to be a human without a to-do list, and to reflect on life, and think about what they really care about. And then they come back, and normally, A, they feel a lot better, and B, we can have a more in-depth discussion on some of their potential avenues for identity outside of fitness and work. Because especially for men, it's not solely a male thing, but especially for men, it's easy to just, again, pour yourself into work and training, and then literally crash out at the end of the day, go to bed, and get up and do the same thing 6 days a week, 7 days a week, and have no real time to exist as a human without a to-do list.
Yeah. It's funny, the personality types that I see a lot in fitness, especially hybrid. The type of person who is an excellent athlete, it's like there's a flip side of that coin. Like, the type of brain that is so good at going all in and getting something done is the exact same kind of person who has absolutely no idea what to do with themselves when they're not all in on something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the exact person who you think would have the easiest time dealing with a change or something like that might be exactly the person that's having the hardest time, because there's their gift is also their curse almost. And that's what I try to stress to people that I work with, where they're like, I don't know why I'm like this. I don't know why I'm all or nothing. And I'm like, no, like your successes in life are because of this. This is a great character trait. We just have to make sure it doesn't become your poison at the same time.
Yeah,
Like,
there's a fear that's like, hey, if I try to temper this, am I going to be less successful?
mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, it's like maybe a little bit, but you're going to have a lot more fun in life. It's funny. It's
Or just,
funny. Yeah,
yeah.
because like the whole obsessive thing, like Leslie and I were having, my wife, we're having a conversation about OCD and kind of my OCD tendencies, basically. And she's like, well, yeah, I never really saw you as like OCD. So I always just thought you were like really disciplined and hardworking, like all these positive sort of character qualities. It was, yeah, absolutely. Like I see that in myself too. And I'm proud of those sorts of things. And then, I take it too far and I work, 14, 16-hour days by the time the to-do list is done. And then I crash out and go to bed and get up and do the same thing again. And it's like, yeah, it's disciplined, and what success I've had is mostly attributed, I think, to that. But it does have a dark side to it that I think I've only in the last few years really kind of become aware of it all. And I'm 34, so what's that tell you?
Hey, I've seen a lot of people not figure it out until much, much later.
Yeah.
I think I was diagnosed with OCD too,
Yep.
so it's interesting that you brought that up. But I think that something that I thought about earlier when we were talking about something else too, I don't remember what it was, but is this idea that, like, I'll give a financial example. I have a hard time spending money. All the advice out there is how to save money, because nobody, that's the general problem. And I think that happens in fitness and probably every area of life, that people do these really good things, but they take them to a maladaptive level, and then there's not much support or even conversation about it, because all the conversation is about the problem that they don't have.
The perceived
But then
positives.
Mm-hmm.
but then they
Mm-hmm.
try to find resources, and all they find is resources that um, lead them down the spiral of their maladaptive thing already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of advice about how to do more work and be more disciplined, but for somebody who's so conscientious that they're disciplined to a maladaptive level, that's just going to make them worse. That's not going to help them.
Yep.
Yeah. I encounter lots of individuals on that side of the spectrum, I think, especially through CHP, like so many of the same type of super driven, super disciplined, super focused person. And when they can no longer force things into that box or that rigidity, the whole system falls apart and they fall apart. And like you said, there's not that many resources. And I think, it's funny, I've always described, again, as a woman talking about men, so I could be incorrect, and it's not all men, but I've noticed that the difference between men and women, especially with training in life, is like with men, life is like a filing cabinet and everything is in its folder. And you guys can just shut the world out and compartmentalize. And if it's training folder time, it's training folder time. And then when it's work time, it's work time. And I think women really struggle with that. Women are always thinking about how things interconnect and interplay and how they need to do something later and do, not that you guys don't experience this. But I've also seen, like you said, that sort of filing cabinet tendency is also super maladaptive for a lot of guys that are way too good at it. Like way too good. So it's like, they shove everything in the filing cabinet and then close it. And then they're like, what is there? Like, what else is there? And your partner or, your family, or, they're just kind of like, okay, well, what do you want to do today? And you're like, what I can do? What is there to do?
What do you mean?
Yeah. Like that, the Jennifer Lawrence meme, or what do you mean? What do you mean? Yeah, I don't know if that's true for everyone, but I've experienced it a lot amongst male and female athletes. And there are definitely some female athletes who are filing cabinet athletes, but for the most part, I see it with men.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would say my training and work folder is now kind of merged, which has been difficult since I started
Mhm.
coaching and everything.
Yeah.
But everything else, yeah, very, very much put it away, compartmentalize, um, which my wife does not understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't actually get it, but like I understand it. Um
Yeah, for
I
me
feel
it
like
was like, because I use like Google Calendar, live and die by Google Calendar. It's like everything is blocked 4:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. Like,
mhm,
okay, this is I'm working, then I'm taking daughter to school, then I'm training them, like blocking, exactly 30 minutes for lunch. Like that's how I operate, and
mhm,
it has helped a lot. And I still find a lot of value in that. And I encourage clients that don't do that at all. It's kind of like, hey, maybe let's
mhm.
bring some order to the chaos.
Yeah.
But for me, it was realizing this is a tool for something. This is not the end. I would sometimes
Mhm.
judge myself by like how many hours I worked versus like what I actually got done. And it was like, that's dumb. Like what? Like what? It's not a contest to see how many hours you're sitting in front of your laptop. Like some things
Mhm.
take longer, some things take less time. And then it's very anxiety inducing if it's like I get something done and I've still got, 30 minutes on my Google Calendar before I've got another call. It's like, and then you feel bad because you're not working, you know. Or the
Yeah.
same thing with workouts. It's like you feel bad because you didn't do your hour. You only did 20 minutes. Oh, what do I do with my hands? Like
Mhm.
it's hard, and it's hard to even say the phrase like give yourself a little grace, because I don't think that many guys resonate. I don't resonate with that phrase. I've heard it all the time. It's like be
Mhm.
self compassion. Give yourself a little grace. It's like I need a different word, and I'm not sure what the word is, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
I feel like
know.
whenever I've told men to give themselves grace or have compassion, I've always heard like a little cat vomit sound
Yeah,
coming from them mentally. Like it just does not resonate. I don't know. What do you think, Justin?
I think that I don't know where this comes from, and maybe this is just my circle of people from the military and things, but I think the voice in the back of your head is always, no matter how much work you do, it's always, don't be a pussy. Like
yeah,
you can
Mhm.
work harder, you can do more. Like, what do you mean grace? Like you don't need grace. Like you bitch. Like
Yeah,
just keep
yeah.
working. And no matter how much work you do on yourself or anything, it's like seems to still be there, whether it's from society or whatever. Um, and so when you say give yourself grace, it almost feels like this, like that's women give themselves grace. Like men don't give themselves grace, which is not great, not a great way to view yourself or the world.
Mm-mm.
And intellectually, it's not something I believe, but there are those like kind of patterns, right, that
Yeah.
repeat kind of in the background. You don't even notice them. So I think that that's just a very interesting thing that I see in myself, and a lot of my friends and athletes I've worked with would agree from the conversations we've had.
Yeah. So knowing that you guys are both coaches, um, and knowing that you guys are now coaching for us, what are the biggest things that you yourselves have got from either mentors or coaches in your life that you would encourage other people to kind of seek out, either by getting a mentor or a coach or a training buddy, or I don't know, anything like that? Something where you were like, you actually made a connection with someone else, reached out for help. That's literally what coaching is. Kind of offboarding some thought and offboarding responsibility for needing to process the information, letting someone else do it for you. Like, what have been your biggest takeaways that have helped you, that you've taken from that you would encourage other people to go out and try to have similar experiences?
I think for me it was, there's the obvious like informational, like you said, like just here, you think about this, like that's huge, especially for
Mm-hmm.
guys that are juggling all kinds of different things. It's easy to like paralysis by analysis, or even if things are going well, thinking about how can I do this better, like it's
Mm-hmm.
never enough. Whereas if it's, I know every single time I've hired a coach, I look, we'll talk training. I've had coaches in other areas of life too, but we'll talk training. Every time I've hired a coach, I've looked at it, whatever, comes up, and it's like, well, that's it. Like the things I tend to write for myself tend to be pretty stupid, just because I know I can, like, not maybe stupid intellectually, but just like it's just a lot. And
Yeah.
because I like, hey, I can handle this, fine. And sometimes it turns out well, and sometimes it doesn't. So that's one of the things where it's like, hey, like reasonable expectation setting from someone who has seen a lot more than you have of you.
Yeah.
Like and there's a lot, again, even as a coach, hiring a coach, I have to get outside my own head. Like I have a certain set of experiences, which when you look at the totality of experiences and knowledge are like a drop in the bucket. It's not even that. Like it's barely a molecule in the bucket, right? And so just getting that additional perspective and experience from someone else, to kind of help you with your own expectations and what's reasonable and what has worked before and what will work again and those kind of things, I think is just enormous. And then someone to just pull you back to reality when you start freaking out a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, oh no, I had a bad day, or oh no, whatever this thing is, like, yo, like actually, like Justin, you said, like that wasn't actually a bad day, like, oh yeah. And that is just, that for me has relieved so much pressure. Same thing in business, same thing with, going to therapy and all these other things that we do to take care of ourselves. It's like, it's just this huge pressure relief to know, like, okay, I don't have to have this completely arbitrary made up standard for myself that's only existing in my own head. you
Mm-hmm.
know like when I
Yeah.
zoom out, I'm big on zooming out. That's one of my favorite strategies. But when I zoom out, it's like, yo, like actually, no, this is going really good. You're doing just fine.
Yeah.
That to me, that is infinitely more valuable to me than any sort of nuts and bolts, sets and reps, that type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for me, I've seen therapists, I've had coaches, fitness coaches, talked to a life coach before. So I kind of, when you asked that question, thought about, oh my gosh, how do I sum all this up into what I would say? But I think the biggest thing is just that it's hard to read the label from inside the box, is the phrase.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of times when I've been speaking with therapists, coach, whoever, and they've said something, and I've just had a moment of like, oh, that's what I would have told myself if I was my athlete. Like, I can't believe I didn't see that.
Mm-hmm.
I would have a lot of money if I had $1 for every time that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even though I know all these things, you can't really see it in yourself a lot of the time. And so having
Mm-hmm.
somebody else to offload that to, and to give them your freak out or your example or your whatever, and then have them say to you what you would have told an athlete is a very interesting experience. Um, but it's needed. Like, you just can't, no matter how introspective you are, you're the one in the body, you're the one living this life. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to see some of those things like you would see right away in somebody else. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing I've gotten across every single area of my life, is just that third party perspective, from
Mm-hmm.
somebody who isn't you. And you could get that from a spouse too, or a friend probably, but I think having like a dedicated person is so, like a professional in that space, whether it's fitness or whatever, but also someone who has no personal relationship with you outside of that, because
Mm-hmm.
they have that special dynamic where they can meet you from that lens. I think
Yeah.
it's huge.
Yeah. I think having someone that you unilaterally like respect in a position where they're like, actually, no, you are doing fine. We'll still do it to ourselves, but I feel like there's a bit more of like all right, well, I can't actually disagree with them because they are
Mm-hmm.
right. Like, it kind of puts you in your place a little bit, and you're like, okay, well, I should probably chill. Um, it's like no matter how good you are, just having someone else be like, legit, you're doing fine. You should probably cool it. And you're like, okay, you're right. I should get on with my day. And then that whole spiral just stops before it even starts.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I want to keep us on a good time. I feel like I keep talking to you guys forever about this. Is there anything else either of you want to mention, get out there, or anything like that? Or do you feel like we've kind of covered all the major themes?
Yeah, I feel pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say that, talk more. If you're a guy that's struggling with something, like, talk more. Everybody else, 90% of people probably understand.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the biggest thing I could have used if I was in the listener's shoes. So
Yeah, it's
I like it.
tough. It's tough. Like the whole talk more thing. That's why, like, I try to be with myself, like social media, but also just interpersonally, I try to be a pretty open book to a degree, like not all the way. It's not appropriate, but with a lot of stuff that I don't think a lot of people, because I couldn't tell you how many people have been like out of nowhere, been like, oh my God, like this, you said this thing and I've been dealing with that for 10 years and whatever. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, especially guys just don't realize. And so but at the same time, it's super scary. And it was very scary for me to start talking about this stuff, especially when I felt like it painted me in kind of a negative light or a weak light, or, whatever phrase you wanted to like use. That's, my language, how I would have described myself at one point. It's hard, but until you get past that threshold of just not caring, and a lot of times it takes like really hurting to not care anymore, unfortunately. Try not to let it go that far. It's just, like just get it out there to someone you trust at first, and then maybe get it out there further if you want. But it's challenging, but man, I couldn't tell you how freeing that has been. It's been just amazing, both, personally, professionally, like everything. It's like, oh, cool. Like I don't have to like hide this stuff anymore, and I can actually support other guys who haven't maybe had the experiences or haven't had the support that I've had so far. And then it just kind of ripple effect, right? Like that person goes to support someone else. So I don't know. I feel like that was really rambly, but just, yeah, that fear is always going to be there. Just get out there with someone you trust and go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing for me, is just the vulnerability and empathy that you develop to then help other people is something that's huge, as you work through things. Like it's going to give you, if you're, I feel like men specifically have this idea of like purpose and service, maybe just an American thing or my circle, but it's going to give you also that capacity to be there for your friends when they need you, because they will at some point, whether they're the most mentally tough person you think or not, or the most closed book, they will at some point, most likely. And the capacity I have as a coach now, but also just as a friend to my own friends, is huge. So that would be that. I will ramble as well. I'll talk forever. So that'll be the last thing I say on it.
No, I love it. Thank you guys. That's super valuable. And I want to reassure our listeners, if you want to talk to Mike or you want to talk to Justin more, you can find them on Instagram. I will probably have posted their bios by the time this podcast is released, but if not, they will be tagged in the description. You can find them on Instagram. You can follow them. Now you can also work with them through CHP. So if you have any fitness goals or anything like that, obviously, there are specialties on the performance side, but also if you're experiencing any difficulties, know that they are also really, really skilled at getting you through whatever perceived barrier that is toward the performance you're looking for. Just maybe it's going to take a little bit longer than you thought, but they won't lie. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Excited to have you both on board. Thank you for talking to me about this. Hopefully we can have a lot more conversations about this in the future.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
It's going to continue to be a thing.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's not going to go away. That's for sure.
No. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, thanks.